Okay, everybody. Thanks for all you new subscribers coming along. I've been amazed at how the channel's growing so fast. I have a bit of a commentary today, and here's my question. What does nationalism, globalism, climate change, Justin Trudeau, $12 million for refrigerators, for Loblaws and all that, what have they got to do with each other? Do you know the connections that are going on here and what they have to do with each other? Well, I want to tell you a little bit about this, so stay tuned. And then at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about what the Bible has to say about some of these subjects. So maybe I won't get into the scriptures right now, but you stay tuned. The Bible actually says things about globalism and nationalism and climate change. It does. It really does. And but first of all, let me break this down into some succinct parts. One, first of all, globalism. Now, what I've got to say to you very definitely is, let's come out and say it. I realized something last week, and I'd never thought about it before. I haven't heard anybody else say this, but it's obvious. Globalists are traitors. That's what globalism is. Globalism is about subverting nations and the sovereignty of nations and getting what were once independent nations to lose their independence and to come under the control of a global government. Those that are wanting to do this are thus wanting to overthrow the present government, or at least manipulate it in such a way that it no longer controls things, like the European Union. Those parliamentarians they elect in the European Union have no say. It's bureaucrats running the whole thing. Maybe you didn't know that. They're actually figureheads, the other guys. But it's obvious that those that want to be globalists and are pushing the whole agenda of globalism are traitors to Canada. They don't, they're not for Canada being an independent nation with our own identity, controlling our own affairs and our own government. They want to surrender it all. Like, let's say we surrender, like to an enemy, and you take over. That's what globalism is after. And so we have within our own country those that are trying to do that right now. Now, here's part of the plan I see unfolding. First of all, if you can create some kind of crisis, like climate change, if you can create a sufficient crisis, a war or whatever, but climate change is the one I'm talking about right now. If you can create a crisis that is strong enough, then secondly, what will happen is sovereign nations will finally get people in their country to yield control of the nation, try to solve the crisis that would threaten the nation, right? And that's sort of what they're saying. You notice right now they're doubling down on climate change like crazy, especially since last year the proof came out, mathematical proof that the climate models were all messed up. They've done it wrong, and it's been proven. But anyway, that's not what I'm talking about today. If sovereign nations see there's a crisis so bad, they'll yield control. And how do they do it? Thirdly, they can do it by getting around the government, or at least elected people like our members of parliament, by doing it through treaties that are set up and presented by bureaucrats with bureaucrats creating treaties that get signed onto without having to go through a whole vote system, without us as Canadians voting on these things. Suddenly we lose control of our sovereignty, we lose control of our government, we lose control of our finances and our financial systems and our marketplace and all of that because of such treaties. And then next, what they do is they pay off leaders. So what's happened with a lot of these things is there's kind of a slush fund that gets set up, and what they do is leaders can get paid off in the background. You say, well, what leaders get paid off? How do they get paid off? Well, I can tell you how they get paid off. Like, for example, I can go through companies or corporations they're involved with, Maybe they're on the board of directors or huge shareholders, or they can go through you might notice that a lot of leaders, world leaders, have charities, foundations of different kind. They're supposed to detach from it, but their family still operates it, and then money goes into them. Like over $100 million came from Russians into the Clinton Foundation in the United States. That's a known fact, never been dealt with down there. And so that's one of the ways to do it. And so it causes them to surrender and usurp and undercut the nation that they're part of. And then the other way we see happening right now is the immigration crisis, overrun with immigration. And once immigrants overrun a country, like in the EU or what they'd like to do in the United States, the immigrants actually get control of the vote, and that's the sort of thing. So that's kind of what's going on in a nutshell. Now I've simplified it like crazy, but hear me out, because second thing I want to talk to you about is what's this got to do with globalism, got to do with climate change and all the stuff about climate change. Well, that is the crisis, one of the crises that's being manufactured. And its purpose is to create a world government. Now, how can I say that? Well, because if you go back to like Copenhagen Treaty, there, the accord they wanted to sign for the climate accord, the bureaucrats, the leaders of the countries coming together to sign an accord. This is what I said, bureaucrats surrendering sovereignty. In the Copenhagen Treaty was all kinds of stuff about creating a world government, surrendering control of your economy to operate it, and a huge part of that money going in to create a standing army to enforce it was in the Copenhagen Treaty. The whistle got blown on this stuff, and then they didn't sign on it. You wonder why a lot of these treaties fail. That's what's going on. But you may not know also what goes on. Where do these trillions of dollars that go into these treaties go? Are they going to the third world countries? Would you even trust the leaders of these third world corrupt countries if they get the money to ever use it properly? No, I don't. And of course, those guys are all going to say, yes, 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 climate change, because, hey, they're getting all the bucks, right? And yet India and China don't, right? But it goes into a massive slush fund. And so green companies get paid out of the slush fund. It also goes into bureaucracies that do things like buy and sell and trade carbon credits, like Al Gore, first climate billionaire, in the middle with a company he's involved with, buying carbon credits, reselling carbon credits. Make yourself billions of dollars. Pachauri, who used to be ICP, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, head, until he got driven out of that because of his sexual improprieties. Same thing, making millions and millions of dollars, buying and selling the carbon credits. So all of this is stuff that's going on here, create the crisis and do it. Now, I'm not saying there's not a ton of people that legitimately believe in this stuff, but all you got to do is start digging in a little bit. You found out the corruption around the research. Just dig back, look up something like ClimateGate emails, and you'll see how actually researchers were colluding with each other to rig the data so that we would think climate change and global warming's happening. Need I say more? This is all going on. There's such money in this thing. And so there you go. There's a link between globalism and climate change, a big deal going on. Now, what's that got to do with Justin Trudeau and the whole thing with the $12 million for fridges and freezers and all that going to Weston, and they got billions of dollars anyway? What's the tie here with this? Well, first of all, it seems to me Justin Trudeau is a globalist. He talks like he is. He says Canada doesn't have a national identity. That was one of the quotes from him. I can't remember where that was, but that's the sort of way he talks. He's clearly in his thinking liking globalism, wanting it to go that way. Well, what happens in Canada then? You have taxes, tons of taxes right now, supposedly to save the earth from global warming, and we're going to do our part. These taxes all go into these, well, not all, a lot of them get returned. They don't actually do anything to help the climate, except they go into these huge slush funds. And then I can't fault Campbell River, for example. The city has gone after all this green funding available and built things like, when they need a new roof in City Hall, let's have a green roof. So, it's covered with, looks like weeds from everything I can see. I haven't actually been up there, but you look down from the hill and it's like, what is this? But the Climate Action Fund pays for lots of infrastructure in Canada. How's that saving stuff? Well, we have green infrastructure and that sort of thing, energy efficiency and so on. And that's the kind of stuff it goes into. But the cronies get their fingers in on these projects, and famous over in UK, the windmill projects and all of that kind of stuff. Doesn't help generate electricity when there's no wind blowing and that sort of thing. But here's the connection, you see. The money gets paid into these funds that get used for all the pet projects that are going on here, there, and everywhere. And guess who these people are often? So often, it's the Friends. You create some green energy company and all of a sudden they're lining up at the trough to get all this money that comes from our carbon tax. And just a bunch of stuff going on there that's not appropriate. So, and then panic stations. Oh, we got to save the country. We got to yield up our economy to these bureaucrats and the control in these treaties, the Paris Treaty and the Trans-Pacific Partnership and all this. We got to keep yielding control over our sovereignty as a nation, undermining who we are as Canadians. And we have an identity. Justin Trudeau, wake up. My goodness. Anyway, pray for him. Just pray for him. It's crazy stuff that he thinks sometimes. I don't know what, where did he grow up anyway? But you know what? I don't want to be mean-spirited about this whole thing, but we do want to be praying for what's going on in our country. That's the kind of connections that Canadians are upset about with why should Loblaws and Westons get $12 million? That's what everybody's upset about right now. Well, the why is in all these series of connection. We're saving the planet. We're going to tax Canadians more money. We're going to give it to all these things. And they keep helping themselves to get in a crisis. But let me say this. That's why, here in a nutshell, this globalism, it's traitorous, this whole thing. It's to destroy and tear down countries and borders. Same deal again. Borders define a nation, and then undefended, unguarded borders. That's what they want, open borders. And you see all that nonsense going on down huge in the United States, but all over Europe and all over there. And believe me, the little bit we're getting in Canada could be a runaway real soon if we don't see a change of government. Well, just let me mention some scriptures, because I said I wanted to relate this to the Word of God before I finish. What does the Bible have to say about sovereign nations and globalism? Listen to this one. Here's Paul preaching in Athens in Acts 17. He is the God who made the world and everything in it. He's the Lord of heaven and earth. He doesn't need temples. And human hands can't serve him. Now listen to this. From one man, he, God, created all the nations of the earth. And he decided beforehand the boundaries of their habitation, the borders of the nations he created, and determined their times and seasons. And this, another translation, he decided beforehand when they should rise and fall and determined their boundaries. So God is in back of the creation of sovereign nations and cultures. God determines their boundaries, borders, and the times they exist. That's determined by God. And why did he do it? He says his purpose was that perhaps the nations should seek after him and find him. His purpose for nations is that they would find God. And then, what about the climate? Well, at the very end, God affects the climate in a way that's bad. But here's, Genesis 8:22, just to end on this right now. Let me get to it here, sorry. This is after Noah building the ark and the promise of God, with the rainbow, interesting, the rainbow is the promise of God. I will never again curse the earth and destroy all living things, even those people's thoughts and actions are bent towards evil from childhood. Listen to this. As long as earth remains, there will be springtime and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night. It will go on. It's not going to get hotter and hotter and only be summer. It's going to be hot and cold. Weather, yes. Climate, changing. Cold, hot, winter, summer, springtime, harvest. That's the Word of God, and that's what you see when you look out there. Okay? So there you go. The connections between all of these things. I hope that helps you out.